Yes, hi, I'm Zimrat Harband. I'm a lead teacher this year in the Gush community, Gush Etzion community. And together with Gabi, we'll go through station rotation.
Yes. Okay, so station rotation is a pedagogy which I love to use in my classroom, and that's why I'm presenting it, because it's something that I actually do a lot. And especially in these times, it can offer a great solution for differential teaching. So before we go into the actual hows and whats and all the questions that you're going to have, I just want to explain quickly what station rotation is. Station rotation is where we take the class and we divide the lesson into different stations, as many stations as you like. I have a large class in my 7th grade, so I'm doing station rotation tomorrow, and there's going to be 6 stations. And Zimrat told me that she's got a very small 12th grade class, which is doing station rotation, and she has 4 stations. You can build as many stations as you want. You can also double stations if you choose. It's up to you. And the whole point of the station rotation is that the students are working. We're not talking. The students are working at the stations and producing. So without further ado, I'm going to go straight into the slideshow. Zimrat, you begin.
Okay, so what is station rotation? It's a form of blended learning in which students alternate between learning stations in which the use of technology and more traditional in-person instructions are practiced. I basically read what you can see now on the board, but if we say it in our words, we're combining between tech stations, teacher-based stations, and practice activities, which the students can do either on their own, if it's independent work, if it's in groups, if it's collaborative work, which is more of a discussion or creating something together in the station. And the idea, like Judy said at the beginning, that this is horizontal learning and way of teaching. There's no sequence. The stations don't depend on one another. The students can start with any station, and then once they're done, they move on to the next one. So you could see here the arrows in which they're going in different directions. We could see the different kinds of stations and what they can consist of. Gabi, you can move on to the next slide.
Okay. I just want to add, Zimrat, if I may, that when Zimrat says it's horizontal teaching, so that means that we can do a lesson, a station rotation based lesson after a unit as a summary, after everyone has some kind of information that we've already taught them frontally, and then they can go and work on these, on the knowledge which they have previously received in a previous lesson and go and work. Okay, so that's the idea, that they already have some kind of knowledge and then they go and work on. Go on, Zimrat.
Okay, right. So these are the 3 basic models of a station. Are one teacher-led station where you're giving the instructions. It also gives you an opportunity to give feedback in the station because you're with them, motivating to work. You could see what they're doing, and it's based on your direct instructions. Whereas the other stations are more independent, where the instructions are written. If it's an offline station, so they read them off a paper that you wrote the instructions, or they're reading from their book. An online station, we also have the added value of the technology, in which they either work again as a group, individual work. It could be self-paced. It could be each student working or listening or watching the clip that you are assigning, and they're producing some kind of a writing activity or reviewing vocabulary, working on grammar, doing a creative writing based on what you're on the unit that you're working on. We'll soon give you some practical ideas and show you things that we've created for our students. But the varied stations is what's important to remember. The activities are varied. They're not only writing, they're not only a reading, it could be even a speaking table in which it's a group discussion, and they're rotating between these different stations according to the number of stations that you decided that you need for your lesson.
And the beauty, Zimrat, I would add, is that we actually can reach out to lots of different learning styles within one lesson. You can have, just as Zimrat said, a vocabulary-based lesson or an acting or a creative. And then the students get a chance to experience something which they're good at and to be a big part of their group in that particular station. So the question is, why would we work this way? Why do we choose to teach in this format? And here we have 6 different reasons. First of all, we can work at any level. I like station rotation in my junior high classes where I have less pressure of bagrut and more time for them to work in groups and to experience different creative activities. You can base your station rotation on any topic. We'll present different station rotations. Zimrat's is a literature-based topic, and mine is textbook-based, okay? I've actually taken activities which are also inside the textbook as part of a station, which means that you don't have to prepare everything by yourselves. You can be using things which are already written in the textbooks and set that up as a station, and I'll show you shortly. We can do it in the traditional classroom and remote learning. During Corona, I did station rotation. Purim was during the Corona, and I did it as a slideshow, and they worked in breakout rooms, and they just went from slide to slide instead of rotating traditionally in the classroom and walking from station to station. So we can be using this face-to-face or online, but we want to stress that we're actually using it face-to-face now, and the advantages of them actually moving and experiencing the different stations throughout the lesson. In stations, we can have either individual work or group work. You choose what's important for you in a particular station. Some of the stations, they work by themselves. Some of them, they work in groups, and they actually have to produce a group product, or they could be working in pairs within a station. So we have lots of different ways of reaching out to the students. And I'm adding here large pods, even though we hope Corona is behind us. I actually had a problem with one of my classes in the winter when we went back after one of the lockdowns, where I had over 20 students in my class, and according to the mitveh, you were only allowed 20. So I actually did station rotation a couple of times in that class. I just doubled up the stations. I split up my class, so there were 15 and 15 or 12 and 12. I don't remember the numbers exactly. And they were doing the same lesson. I'm working individually throughout the lesson. And in that particular station rotation, there wasn't a teacher-led station because I was jumping between the 2 classrooms. So what I wanted to say is that when we build a station rotation, we can actually reach out and to all different styles, all different types of work which they experience throughout the lesson.
Gabi, we could also add to that, that in the groups that we're dividing them, I mean, we're getting into differential learning, and you're going to stress it now, that we can decide how we're dividing our class and the students according to levels, and you'll get to it right now.
Right. So
just one question. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Do the student have to rotate between like physical classroom and online classroom, or they have?
No, so we have different, that's a good question. So we weren't clear. We're talking about doing station rotation in the classroom, in the physical classroom. And let's say there are 4 stations. So one station can be to watch a YouTube clip and to answer questions. So that's what we meant as an online station. And after they finish that, they go to the next station, and that may be to create a poster. And then they go to the next station, and it may be working on vocabulary. It could be with something digital where they have to take their phones out and do a Quizlet, or it could just be something from the book. You tell them station 3, open your workbook, page 50, exercise 3, and that's what they have to do. Okay. And if you want to make it nicer and you have time, I took something from the workbook and I just copied, paste, and put it onto little bristolim, and they had to match up, and then they had to copy it out in the workbook. But you don't actually have to do that every time because it's a lot of work. If you want to make a really pretty lesson and you have time, then that's great. But if not, then they can be working at a station. So that's what we mean by an online and an offline. Online is where they need a phone or a tablet or some kind of digital device, and offline is when they don't. And the teacher-led station is where the teacher sits and she is leading the station. So I want to talk about the differential learning now.
Excuse me,
as we've all been...
I'd like to ask, are we going to have the slideshows of this?
Yes, I'll post it at the end of the, of course I will. So we've all done mapping tests. We're in the process of mapping our students at the moment. And what we want to do, our biggest goal is to close gaps which have opened dramatically over the past few months. And station rotation is a way that we can reach out to all the students in one single class. So here are 4 ways to reach out. So I'm going to read the first one. It says stations are according to the students' levels. The teacher assigns each student to the stations he must complete. So that means that if I have, I know that after the mapping test that I have students who are weak at a particular skill, I'll build another station and I will give my students stickers, or I'll divide them into groups and tell them what stations they have to complete by the end of the session, by the end of the lesson. So I may have 4 mandatory stations, and then 2 where I say anyone with a blue sticker, you have to go to stations 5 and 6, and anyone with a yellow sticker has to go to 7 and 8. And that's where the differential teaching comes in, where I've actually created stations according to how I saw in their mapping test what they need, what these students are, what they're missing, what they require for them to close the gaps. So you can actually build stations according to closing these gaps which have opened. That's one way of building a station rotation. Another way is that you can actually use the same station but have differential instructions in order to reach all learners. Now, it could be either differential instructions or differential activity. For example, if I'm doing a vocabulary station and I know that I have some weaker students in my class, then I'll give them a worksheet where they circle the correct answer. Whereas if they're very strong, I'll give them a word box and they have to, think a bit harder and complete a worksheet using the word bank. Now you can also, that's the beauty about the station rotation, is that you know your classes and you know your books and you know what you want to do and what gaps you want to close. And sometimes you'll also want to have a lot of collaborative learning in your station, and you can therefore mix and match strong and weak students and put them in stations. And that's what I'm going to do tomorrow with my station rotation. I've not added extra stations. I actually want group work within the station. So I've assigned, in advance, I assigned the students, and I'll tell them at the beginning of the lesson who's in each group. And then I've put 2 weak students with 2 stronger students so that they will work together. Now, assign your students ahead of time, and then your stations will work according to how you want them to work. And the teacher-led station is a great, great opportunity to actually close gaps with certain students, and you can use it as a paratani lesson within a lesson where all the students are learning and they're all at different stations, and you have the students that you want with you and they're getting a paratani session. Or it can be like what Zimrat's going to present, where she's taken the hardest station as a teacher-led station. She wants to guide her students to do a bridging task in a literature lesson. And that's the teacher-led station, because she felt that that's where they needed the most guidance. So the beauty of it is that you can really play around and build the station so it matches the needs of your students.
Gabi, would you like us to answer the questions that are related now, or should we save them for the end? Because there's a few questions on the chat.
There's a few questions, so go and answer, Zimrat. I didn't see.
Okay, so someone asked if this is like a choice board or physical, just a second, I can't see the question right now. Is it a physical choice board inside the classroom? So it could be a choice board if we're talking about differential learning. And then like Gabi said at the beginning, is we have, let's say 6 stations and then 4 are mandatory and the other 2 are according to level. And so we can call it a physical choice board, but they all have to, they're rotating, they're going around the stations. It's not like they can choose to do 1 or 2. We are talking about usually a double lesson. So I think a minimum of 4. And then you can add according to the way you're dividing it, if it's for differential learning and emphasizing different things for different students. So it becomes a choice in which they can pick and choose if it's a station that, meets their standards. About organizing and planning, we'll talk about that in a few more minutes. And
I would like to just say about organizing and planning that if you have teachers who are teaching the same book in the shikhva, you can actually organize it and, dedicate a staff meeting to setting up these stations and writing and deciding together what you want in the stations. And then the workload goes down. I'm not going to pretend it's not a lot of work. I don't do this every single lesson. It's usually as a summary, or if there's something special in the book, or as a literature lesson. It's not something that I practice every lesson, but every so often I do a stop and we're having station rotation. And my students are used to it. They know that. And when I say station rotation, I tell them in advance, next lesson is station rotation. They know they have a Torah note where they have to set up the class and put 2 desks together with 4 chairs around the desks. It's something that they know in advance. Now, also about the planning, so you can think of the stations, you can be imaginative and think of whatever stations you want to practice in your lesson. But also, as I said before, you can also use things from the book. You don't have to invent the wheel. You don't have to have everything made up from your own head. You can use things which are materials which are out there, and you just write it on a piece of paper, print it on a piece of paper, and it's in the center of the station. It's like learning centers, yeah. So each station for a specific time. Okay, so we're going to deal with these questions in the next two slides. And if we haven't, then ask them again at the end. Okay, so one of the reasons that I love using station rotation is because we're actually offering our students an opportunity to practice 21st century learning skills. There's collaborative work within the stations, time management, super important. You tell them in advance how long you're giving them for each station. And I also, I've actually got an egg timer which beeps when the time's up. Now, usually I always do it in a double lesson. Sometimes the stations are 10 minutes, sometimes 12, sometimes 15, depending on the number of stations which they have to run throughout the lesson. And usually I always ask one student from every group to be the time manager so that they know how much longer they've got left to complete the station. Obviously, it encourages curiosity and creativity. They're always curious to see what's the other group doing in the next station that they haven't reached yet, what's going on there. I always have a creative station. It could be a poster, graffiti wall. There's 100 ideas out there. I'm sure you're all using them. Negotiation within the team. They're using computer skills, which they're actually real pros at this year, and public speaking and leadership. So what I do is when I plan a station rotation, if I have a double lesson, which is 90 minutes, and they finish, I plan for them to finish the stations within 70. And then we have 10 minutes to get the class organized, and then 10 minutes for them to present anything which they produced within the stations. And then they have to speak up and present, and they have to choose who's going to do it, who their leader's going to be. So those are the 21st century learning skills which we get in through the back door. Now, these tips are mega important, and Zimrat's going to read them.
Right.
This is after bad experiences which we had in the classroom. So we wrote down what didn't work.
And I think it will answer some of the questions on the chat. And if not, we'll relate to it afterwards. So some useful tips for a successful station rotation. So in terms of starting off the lesson, you can't just start the lesson with sending them to the stations. You first have to give instructions and explain how it works and what is station rotation, what is expected for them, and how long they're going to be spending in each station. They have to understand the method that it's working in. It's not you're sitting in one place and that's what you're doing the double lesson. You're supposed to rotate. You can put it on the board. You can have a map of the stations, numbers of the stations. You could use stickers for the groups. You can have a list of students on the board, but you have to give a lot, like 10 minutes for a first explanation. And if you like it and you start using it, your students are going to get used to it very quickly. And once you say station rotation, they'll know what is expected from them. What can vary, of course, are the groups or the way you divide them from each lesson that you're doing it. Another very important thing to remember, a tip, is you should use it in a double lesson. In one 45, 50-minute lesson, you won't be able to cover. They won't be able to rotate properly. You want them to be there at least 15 minutes for a station in order to experience the station, complete the work. We're not dragging. This is not homework. They're not taking anything home. They're finishing it in the time you allotted for that station. And now, of course, here comes the, a tricky part where you have weaker students, and then you can play around with the level of the station for that. And so if everybody's doing vocabulary, like we mentioned, so they're doing a different kind of vocabulary, so which they can complete in 15 minutes. Or if we're doing writing, they're going to get a shorter writing assignment. Or you're mix and matching weak students and strong students, and they're doing it as a collaborative work, and they're producing one thing together. Just a second, the chat is blocking me. Okay. We talked about time management. So we want to have one student who's the timekeeper. We can also project, we're going to see that tip coming up soon. We can also project a timer. We could use, the ones we have on YouTube. If our stations are 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 12, you can have that 12-minute go on, and there's the bell or a buzz, and they know that they have to get up. They're stretching, they're moving. Also, this movement, this brain breaker for moving from one station to another, is giving them ability to come again to the next station more focused. Go on, Gabi. Again, the instructions beforehand of how it works, but also the instructions for each station. If we're talking about an offline station, you want to have these instructions written down so you're free to work with your group. If you have a station that is teacher-led, you won't be able to answer their questions. It has to be very clear, and instructions that are detailed, that the students can follow on their own, so they won't interrupt you. If you're having it on an online station, the same, we have to have the clear instructions. And it could be, if it's on, if it's on a Google form or on the YouTube clip or whatever it is, it has to be very straightforward, so they could actually work independently in their group or individually according to the assignment. And a major tip to keep in mind is that you have to allot the same amount of time for each station, or else you're going to have like a traffic jam. You're going to have students who finished one station and cannot move to the other one. We always have, students who work, who are more lazy, it takes them more time, or they're slow, or they're not motivated, and we have the ones who will complete it more quickly. So we need a balance. So you have to allot enough, the same amount of time, and you could see sometimes they'll finish 2 minutes before, they'll drag it 1 minute here, 1 minute there. That's okay, but you can have a gap of 5, starting from 5 minutes, because then things are not going to work, and you're going to get into classroom management problems and students walking around having nothing to do. Of course, make sure each student knows whose group member he is a part of, and that they're walking as a group from one station. They can't decide that they want to, switch around and move in the middle, because we want them to be able to complete all the stations at the end of the lesson, and keep track of that. This is another excellent tip to us teachers. Give yourself permission not to grade everything. Okay, we're not grading all the work that they're doing on the station rotation. That's not the idea. It could be that one of the assignments they have to, let's say if it's for the tech station, they have to submit a Google form, and you're going to be getting that and grading that later, or reviewing it later. But you don't have to grade all the stations. That's why you're going to design them in a manner that they're not necessarily graded, or they're presented. So it's a product that they're creating and they're presenting it in the last couple of minutes, or it's a group discussion that they're having within the group, and that is the assignment. we're not interested in collecting all the work that they're doing afterwards. You as a teacher probably want to focus on certain things, and then you can decide which one you would like to take and have a closer look at. We talked about keeping your stations varied. That's the whole idea of station rotation. It's taking different activities and making an opportunity for all the students to find something that they enjoy. It could be creative, it could be fun, it could be from the textbook, but they're doing it in groups, so it becomes more exciting. The idea is not to create new materials and new working hard with things that are going to take a lot of time, but you could actually take the same exercises in your unit and just divide them into stations, add some color, add some group discussion, collaborative working, and then they're ready. You have something that's varied. Then open your books and do exercises 1 to 4.
Zimrat, I think we should show them an example because we don't
Right.
have very much time.
Okay, so let's go to the examples, and I'm going to start with so Gabi, could you open my
Yes.
presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so I created a station rotation activity for my students, my 11th graders. And this is literature based, and we want to show you 2 examples of one that could be more higher level, and one that's more for junior high, or not necessarily strong students. The stations that I built are 4 stations. It's a double lesson. I need 20 minutes, about 20 minutes for each station in order for them to complete the work. I have 4 stations. One is a teacher-based station, in which this is after reading the enemy. This is after discussing the lots and the hots and pretty much covering the whole unit. And now I want to give them a little bit of a review before the summative assessment. I want to give them some more knowledge in different aspects to the story. So the first station is bridging text and context, and we're going to discuss physician's oath, and it's a teacher-led. I'm going to give them instructions, and I'm going to give them time. This is not the bridging text here is not a graded component. They'll be graded on the post reading activity. Therefore, it's not a long writing, and I'm allotting the time for it to be able to finish and do within the station. The next station is practice activity, independent work, in which they're reviewing with a Quizlet the main vocabulary from the story, and they're filling in information about a summary. Over here, everything is an online form, but within the classroom, you could definitely take things that you have in the book and have them do the summing up exercises in the book. The next station is also a practice activity. I mean, of course, one of the main things about treating the enemy. So it's a little bit more creative. It's connecting it to their life here in Israel, and stories that are true stories from the news, how Israelis have been helping their enemies throughout different wars and struggles that we've gone through. And it's a collaborative station.
1 minute, they're pulling this
discussion.
out, so I'm stopping to share
Okay.
because I want to share the slideshow with everyone who's here. I'm sure you want to, oh, why can't I minimize? Because I'm recording. Hold on. I'm sorry, 1 sec. So let me go out from here. I'm going to just share the slideshow. Zimrat, you can continue. Carry
Okay,
on.
and the last one is a tech station, in which they watch a short YouTube clip about a different aspect from the story, Japanese living in America during World